So now focusing on the theoretical perspectives on management control, we start with a very classic approach that I think this was the dominant view about 100 years ago, 180 years ago, where management control kind of emerged from the economics point of view of society. And management accounting is seen at this time at this point of time as just a tool to make things more efficient, linked to a lot of theories from economics. That is why it's called the economics approach. So management control was seen like as a tool to make the economics theory work. And in here, and it's interesting because at that time there was a lot of debate on economic theories, the neoclassical economics that maybe you learn in your probably micro and macro too, microeconomics, that they argue that there is always a balance. You remember the X and Y, and there is always that the demand and supply will, and there is also assumptions like the free market and that you can compete with everyone, blah blah blah. This kind of neoclassical assumptions are also related in how management control was studied at that time. This idea that how can management control can help on keeping this perfect market assumption, like through management control mechanisms like costing and like reporting in a way, it was possible to kind of achieve this assumption from neoclassical economics that there was a balance, that there was a free market equilibrium. All of these assumptions from neoclassical economics were possible because of management control. That is a lot of old research on that, like accounting helps to do that. And then we also have Keynes, which is kind of a contrast to neoclassical economics. From his point of view, he argues that, first of all, there is not possible to achieve an equilibrium, like there will always be a disequilibrium between supply and demand. And then governments and society needs to be aware of this. That is something that also kind of management control aims to tackle. Based on this assumption that we cannot have an equilibrium, then management control can help to point out which is the disequilibrium. Because if we apply that assumption that supply and demand will not always fit in the company, then we can plan better budgets, then we can plan better, I don't know, production development, these kind of things. So there were kind of two trends, the neoclassical trend and the Keynes trend, where management control developed. But both of them were from the economics point of view. This point of view where management control is only seen as an efficient tool, and that's it. It will only help me to produce more, to find the balance of which is the amount of production I need to have the most efficient price. For example, all of these things related to economics are from this approach. And I don't know, maybe at this point in the lecture you are reflecting, but some practitioners think that management control is this. Management control is about efficiency, and that's kind of that's true. First of all, I have seen a lot of practitioners referring to management control as a tool to reveal or to identify your costs, and that's it. So it's a bit kind of how can like surprising that in practice management control is seen as something that was work 80 years ago. It's super old, this vision that management accounting is only about efficiency. But still, it is true that management control is about efficiency. It's not only that, we will see that in a second, but it's still true that it's part of it. So there is also, right now, there is also some kind of research based on this. There is research, very classic research that aims to, there is a new development of a new tool, like I think some years ago, ERPs were a huge topic. And then what is the relationship between ERP implementation and performance or production? These kind of things, like very classic kind of problems. Like, is this tool going to improve efficiency? Yes or no? That's it, nothing more. So there's still space for this, but it's very old. It's very kind of difficult sometimes to problematize. And on the other hand, from the practitioner's perspective, in practice, maybe this is what the debate is about. Like, just give me the tool that makes me more efficient. Just give me a tool that makes me that makes costs more transparent, and that's it. I don't care about behavior. I don't care about power. I don't care about anything. I just care about cost. So think about this approach is interesting in a way, but from strictly academically is quite old. But let's move forward with the next theoretical perspective, which again is chronologically the next step. The economics approach is very macro, is at a big level. In the end, it's trying to apply a macro theory at a lower level. This idea of the balance, but applied at the company level or at the industry level. So there were some issues. A lot of academics and economics academics claimed that it was too difficult to only move from the macro to the micro. So then they said, why don't we use a theory from organizations, from general management in management control? And that is when this approach came, the agency approach. And I try to put pictures in every slide that are a bit relevant. In here is a picture of King, so very boring picture. Here is a picture of James Bond, because James Bond is a good example of an agent. And the idea of agency theory is that in organizations, there are agents who have kind of an objective that is kind of being told by the owners of the company, but the agents on themselves, they have their own agenda. They also have their own objectives. So it's kind of the same with James Bond. He has kind of some objective that has been told by the British government, so he has to do something, but at the same time, he also has its own interest, which is drinking and gambling and dating. So he kind of finds a way to have both things, to fulfill his objective at the same time, drink and gamble and meet women. So the agency problem in the agency theory is kind of like that. I want my manager to do what I do from the owner perspective. I want him to blah, blah, blah. I want him to do this and that. But the manager has also some objectives for him or her. Maybe the manager wants to develop his CV, his or her CV. They want to, I don't know, like have new connections. There are different things. So then we have what we call the agency problems. And I don't want to go into details with agency theory and all of the assumptions, but the idea is that management control can be used to minimize these agency problems. So when me as an owner, I give the agent this objective, I can also kind of set some uh, control mechanisms to make sure that the agent is going to do what I say. And then I can play with these mechanisms to make it work in the right way. And beyond the introduction of the agency theory to management control literature, there are also some good or some important advancements, because some key concepts that now are very relevant before they were not in there, like uncertainty, information cost, self-interest, moral hazard, all of these concepts that now are very clear in management control literature. Before they didn't exist, before they were called like the aggregate demand, like um, the consumer preferences, these kind of things. But now they are more at the lower level, like information cost, like self-interest, the self-interest of the agents. All of these concepts were new at that point of time. And by that point of time, I mean around the 70s. So that's when this kind of emerged. I am giving you references because these references are like very classic references, but they were written a little bit after that revolution. So they kind of, um, after all of this shift happened, they kind of try to summarize all of that in some studies in very good journals. So if you, again, if you are reflecting of this perspective in practice, maybe we see it as a kind of second step from here. I think like maybe the first approach from a practitioner to management control is to be more efficient. And then the second kind of layer of thinking is, okay, I care about efficiency, I care about costs, but how do I reach that? Maybe through this agency approach. So they recognize these kind of things, self-interest, information cost, uncertainty. They recognize these concepts and then they recognize that they need to treat them with management control mechanisms um, in order to become more efficient. So it's in a way kind of an add-on from the economics theory. And then in terms of the current literature on management control and agency approach is also not like it's not it's of course not seen as something new because it's old. But on the other hand, there are many articles still written today about agency problems and how they can be solved or not with management control mechanisms. So the agency approach is still used. It's not like economics approach. This is very rarely used. This is more common. But again, you have to be very smart on how to problematize an agency problem because since we have had this for 50 years, a lot of problems have been already solved. So you need to be very smart. What is the problem that we still have? So it's a possibility to have an agency approach in your dissertation, for example, but just be aware that you will need to think super smart what to do. And then we will move to two theories that I think are more relevant right now. They are kind of more applicable in certain ways. And they are so important that actually the next lectures will be kind of based on this approach. But let's start with the first theoretical perspective, which is the contingency approach. So uh, this approach focuses more, instead of focusing on the agent, it focuses more on the structure. It says that the issue with companies who pursue a certain strategy is that maybe they don't have the structure that can help the company to achieve it. For example, I think you know me in person, and I think you are aware that I cannot be an NBA player, right? Even if I train 10 hours per day, I'm too short to play NBA in basketball at the highest level. So no, impossible. So that is kind of the contingency approach in organizational problems. If a company wants to be very efficient in inventory, but they have a lot of bureaucratic procedures in they have a lot of kind of a big structure with a lot of controls, like if someone has to say yes and then so it's very slow. Can that happen? No, because like having a very quick inventory management requires to be lean, requires to be flexible, requires to be kind of quick. And if you are the opposite, if your structure is very dense, if it is with a lot of bureaucracy, then there is no fit between your strategy and your structure. This is the contingency approach that the has to be a fit in there. And the management control perspective in this theory is that management control can help to fix that. That if there is a, a need, for example, to be leaner, because now we are pushing a strategy that is about having less inventory, then you can implement management control mechanisms that can reduce the bureaucracy. Or the opposite, if you care about being very careful and have like a lot of quality, then you can implement management control mechanisms that can help you to do that. So in the end, that's why it is called contingency approach, because the claim is that management control will help you with any contingency that you have to adapt the structure that to modify or to adapt the structure that you have based on the contingencies that you are facing. So for example, if there are new regulations and you have So the regulation is, I don't know, like it's at this level, and you have a structure that is at this level, there is no fit, then management control will play a role in kind of adapting that structure to make it reach the contingency that you are approaching. So that is the overview on contingency theory, that management control will help the organization to adapt, to modify a little bit the structure to make a fit for what they want to do. And it's interesting because the agency approach and the contingency approach more or less moved at the same time, but the agency approach stopped before the contingency approach. The contingency approach continued more. It was very popular in the 90s, even in 2000s, it was very popular. And the agency approach, it was not that popular in the 2000s. It was more like in the 80s. So interesting, they started at the same time, but the contingency approach moved forward a little bit quicker. And then we have the strategic management approach, which is a bit similar to the contingency approach because it's related to the fit between the strategy and the structure of the company. So then the strategic management approach, the idea is that management control can help to understand the cause and the effect of the decisions that we make in relation to the strategy. So it is by using management control mechanisms, we can learn if for example, maybe the implementation of a new technology leads to better performance or no. It's the better performance which leads the implementation of the new technology. That is one example of what the strategic management approach aims to do. That it is unclear without management control if the company is only reacting to what's happening outside or if the company is actually leading and causing these changes. So management control can help you to realize about that and then kind of take the leadership and decide what you want to do. I think a very clear example of a strategic management approach in management control is a balanced scorecard, because a balanced scorecard gives you that. It gives you first an overview of what is happening, like what is kind of, so it gives you feedback from the customer, from finance, from all of these things. Then you set some objectives, then you implement them, and then you measure. So in the end, it gives you an overview of what you have done and what is the outcome of that. And then it also gives you the power to kind of change that. So you are aware like, this, if we did this, it cost this in terms of the strategy. We implemented this new customer satisfaction, whatever, and then we had this result, and then you can link that to a certain improvement that you made, like maybe you implemented like automatic cashiers. So then you can see what happened. First of all, what happened if the implementation caused the outcome or if the outcome caused the implementation and it was just a reaction. All of these possibilities can be solved through management control mechanisms. And finally, it also gives you the possibility to make modifications. So then you can invest more, or you can invest less, or you can focus on certain specific issues. So these two are a bit similar. Contingency approach is, again, I told you, like when the strategy and the structure do not fit well, because there is a contingency coming over, like a new technology or something, then management control can help you to kind of close that gap. And in here, it's kind of the same idea, but more focused on that, how that happens, how this gap is closed. Balanced scorecard is a very good example. Like with this idea of strategic management control, we can identify what is going on, what are the relationships here and there, and how you can regain control of all of this. And I say that these two approaches are very popular right now. I think they are popular because they are kind of doable in a way. Like when we think about empirics, we can collect data related to this. So you will have more lectures specifically on these two approaches because they are very important. But before we also before we focus more on this, we also need to revise the other following approaches, because there are also newer approaches. We will talk about them, but in the end, we will focus mostly on these two, the contingency and the strategic management approach. But it's also important that you are aware of the others, so then it can help you to problematize better your problem.